He should have left when he had the chance. Not that he'd ever had much of a chance. When he could have left, it would have been a death sentence without the anti-rejection drugs he'd been given on a daily basis. Once that had no longer been an issue, things had changed, and walking out was no longer an option. Whoever it was nudged him again. "Wake up, Fergal!" That got his attention. No one called him Fergal anymore. Well, no one except Stefan. He rolled onto his back and blinked into the harsh light. "Where the fuck have you been?" he snapped, sitting up and running a hand through his shoulder-length hair, rubbing his scalp. There was a dull ache in his head, but he was used to that now. It had been getting worse since they'd given him the final stage treatment 2 months ago. That had been the last time he'd seen Stefan. Stefan was the head scientist at Cybercom, and this whole project was his baby. He was also the closest thing Fergal had to a buddy in this place. He'd never made friends easily, but they'd clicked. "I'm being watched," Stefan said. "I didn't want to bring attention to you." Fergal gave him a sharp look. His brain felt blurred. Now he forced himself to concentrate, sensing Stefan had something important to say. "Who's watching you?" Stefan didn't answer the question. Instead, he asked one of his own. "Do you know what's been happening outside?" "Yeah, of course I do." "Not." They told them nothing. It was enough to drive a nosy bastard like him insane. In the beginning, it had been okay. They'd had access to the comm streams, and he'd been able to keep up with what was happening on the outside. Back then, he'd presumed his stay here was only temporary, that once he no longer needed the drugs, they would let him out into the world. They'd monitor his progress, but he'd be free to come and go. Then everything changed. The last news he'd heard officially had been over 20 years ago. Callum Meridian, the leader of the known universe, was missing. The collective was in disarray, and the church was attempting a takeover. After that, everything had gone dark. Their access to the comms cut off overnight. At first, Stefan had fed him what information he could. Although he'd refused to discuss company business, he'd kept Fergal up to date on what was going on. But for the last 5 years, nothing. The only positive in this whole damn thing was that the treatment was obviously working. As far as Fergal could tell, he hadn't aged a day since he had walked into Cybercom all those years ago. When the church came into power, the company tried to stay under the radar, Stefan said. That was when we had the shutdown. It was considered too risky for any of the volunteers to be out there. So you locked us up, like prisoners. You signed the agreement. Yeah, he had. But back then, he would have signed anything to get into the program. So what's changed? He presumed something had precipitated this visit. 5 years ago, the church found out about our existence. At that time, they were still busy wiping out the collective and the rebel coalition. But now, they've turned their attention to us. I have every belief that within the next few days, they will be taking control of Cybercom. That wasn't good news. The Church of Everlasting Life claimed that all genetically modified beings, or GMs as they were known, along with all collective members, the old ruling class, were abominations against God. He doubted that the products of Cybercom, including himself, would fare any